All right. Hello, everyone. If there's any issues with audio, quick, let us know before we start recording. But we should be good. All right. You ready to get started?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Make sure I remember what episode this is. All
It,
right.
it all starts to blur together.
Yeah. I've been surprised by how quickly we've been doing these episodes. They're all starting to kind of roll into one another.
Oh, it'll
But
start piling up before you know it.
sounds good to me, honestly. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 4 of the EQNX podcast. I am here with Esteban, also known as the Besteban. Esteban, why don't you tell
Hello.
the people a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, as mentioned before, my name is also known as the Besteban. I'm a videographer and editor and I guess documentarian in the fighting game community. I've been way too long.
You know, I really like videos. I really like storytelling. But before we get to that, why don't you kind of tell us some about your fighting games origin and why you kind of chose fighting games over any other sport?
Sure. So I got into fighting games. It's actually because my mom. My mom got me into gaming. She was the one who got me into like my first systems, like my Nintendo, my Super Nintendo. She's the one that took me to arcades. And I grew up in New York. Grew up in Brooklyn in the early '90s, where like arcade machines were everywhere. I had pizzerias, outside bodegas, and video rental stores, just like on a random corner. Like they were just everywhere because it was a good, easy way to get people attracted to your store. And like, if you're playing Street Fighter 2 outside of a convenience store, you might want to grab a drink. You go and grab a drink, play more Street Fighter. Might want to grab some chips, play more Street Fighter. It was just a good way to generate income. And with going to arcades and with just existing in the early '90s, I found Street Fighter 2, and I loved video games. But this was like the first time I saw somebody fighting, like playing directly against another player. It's usually a lot of co-op back then, like things like Metal Slug or like co-op games or beat 'em ups like Final Fight and stuff like that. But this was the first time I saw somebody playing another player, and I got hooked. And like it was a community thing, it was a communal thing. Like there were no guides or anything like that. People would show you how to do moves, or you'd watch somebody's controllers and figure. That's how I figured out how to do like a raging demon in like X-Men versus Street Fighters. That somebody did it to somebody, so I watched their hands as they were doing it, and then like I put my money in the machine, and then I tried to do it. So it was a cool kind of community thing, and I was just always attracted to the one-on-one nature of fighting games, like outsmarting an opponent and like knowing what they're doing and countering like a person strategy. I'm a big like strategy guy. I love seeing a strategy develop on screen and get executed. So that's what really got me into fighting games, is really just kind of like the competition amongst each other in a community was what really got me to stick with the genre.
Right. I think that's what really draws a lot of people in. Is I feel like everyone has those experiences. You play some MOBA, some FPS where you're with a team and your teammates are always just bad. And
I'm
so,
playing a lot of Valorant right now, and man, everyone forgets about Spike, and it drives me insane.
oh yeah, and that's what is so great about fighting games. It's all on you.
Yep.
You either make the mistakes or you either make the right decisions,
Yep.
which for some people is not so great because if you're like me, you make a lot of wrong decisions when you're playing.
Yeah,
But
and man,
at least those things are on you. It's not, you can't blame it on anyone else. So you either take the loss and start improve or you just get
yeah,
salty. So
yeah. There's like a famous image. It's like I'm not sure what Gundam show it's from, but it's definitely from like a Gundam show or mech show, and it's like two images of like the same guy, or like the top image says "I'm a genius," and then immediately right underneath it, it's like him penning going, "Oh no!" And I'm like, that's fighting games right there, where like you think you've the best airtight plan, and then somebody like comes over and just knocks it off the table. But that's what I really like. I like that kind of that scramble of like, okay, my best laid plans have been torn asunder. How do I recover? And you only have like a couple of games to do that in tournament, or even when you're playing casual. So like that thrill is what really keeps me hooked.
yeah, and I think obviously a lot of people as well. So now that you're hooked on fighting games, how did you move into doing more than just playing? So videography, documentary work, video editing, that kind of stuff.
So I've always been aware of the scene in terms of like the general fighting game community. Like I used to watch like Evo reruns, and like I used to read the back of like Tips and Tricks magazines when I was growing up. Like if you didn't know Tips and Tricks was like a game magazine, and in the back, I'm not sure who wrote it. I'd have to look it up, but like there would be like tournament reports. Like people would go to tournaments like in California or New York and be like, "Well, Justin Wong won the Marvel 2 tournament," or somebody like Alex Valley won like Alpha 2 or something like that. So I would follow the scene in that way, but it wasn't until I graduated college, like around like 2014, I forget, it's been so long, or I started being able to attend events and like go to things like I think East Coast Throwdown 4 was my first event, and I had always had a passion for mostly editing, but I was learning how to shoot video. So I went to East Coast Throwdown 4. I grabbed a camera and I just started doing interviews because I was just really curious. Like I mentioned before, like I'm interested in strategy, right? So I was always curious about talking to players about, well, why did you do this in a match, or why did you do this, or what informs your play and stuff like that. It just kind of asking, talking to players about what they do and why they do it, and just kind of getting a general sense of community, like what's going on in the FGC at the time. So it was just a natural curiosity of like I really wanted to do it, and I wasn't seeing a lot of it out there media wise. And it was kind of selfish in that I wanted to practice and just have things to edit. And why not practice on something on a subject I really loved?
Right. And I mean, editing is one of those skills like any other skill where you have to practice. And it's so much more fun to practice when the subject that you're working with is something you're interested in.
Yes. Yeah. It makes you, and it keeps you motivated, right? Because you can see improvement, or at least I can see improvement in what I'm doing. Like, not just from the editing perspective, but like where I set my interviews, or what kind of lighting I use, or if I could even have lighting or anything like that, or like how I do the audio and stuff like that. So like you can see the process like the iteration starts to get better, it gets cleaner, and you see improvement. And so that kind of, again, like with fighting games, like when you put something together and like it works out and your execution gets better, it was the same way for me with video. I just treat it like you would train in a fighting game, I would treat it with training in my videos.
Got it. So, did you work on anything for video work outside of the FGC before Hold Back to Block?
No, I am primarily self-taught. I took maybe a couple classes in community college, but like I used to edit anime music videos. That was how I got my first computer, winter of 2000, when I moved to Jersey. I used to live in Brooklyn and moved to Jersey. Got my first computer a couple months after that, and I just opened Windows Movie Maker and just downloaded a bunch of anime stuff off of like whatever file sharing programs existed at the time, and I just cut those together with like Linkin Park or whatever, and just make movies that way. And that's how I got my practice with editing. And then with the camera stuff, I had like a college roommate that sold me a 5D Mark II, and that's how I started kind of practicing video. But yeah, everything, I never took like a formal class. Like when I went to college, it was for interactive multimedia, which was for everything but digital media. Like
Hmm.
it was like very separate from the communications department. And I just kind of replicated what I liked in terms of editing and in terms of like video framing, and just kind of practice from there, like imitation, and then kind of breaking down, well, why does this work, or why doesn't this work, and then experimenting with like, once you know the rules, like doing a little bit of research on your own, like once you know the rules of like rules of thirds and all that kind of stuff, then you can kind of understand why you break them or when you would break. So no, like I didn't have any formal training, I didn't have any work. I don't think I've ever had a job, like even after college, I wasn't a video person. I was like a freelance web developer because I couldn't find video jobs. Video was not like what it was now, where everyone is doing video. Like everyone has a video person. It was very kind of like not frowned down upon, but it was thought about as like, well, who really needs that? Like we really need to focus on the website. We really need to focus on like our email campaign, stuff like that. So when I graduated, it was like right at the beginning of video becoming a thing, which I think helped because, especially in fighting games, there weren't a lot of people doing anything video wise. So it's much easier to break in terms of like grabbing top players for interviews, or kind of not, having a supportive audience and stuff like that, because like everyone's a lot more critical. But yeah, no, it was literally hold back the block that was my video job, still is.
Wow. I mean, that happened to me. I did luckily get a chance to take a video production class while I'm in school, but before I took that class, when I was working at EchoFox, they're like, "Hey, do you have editing software?" I said, yeah, I think so." Cool. Make some highlights videos for the league games for this weekend or the fighting games tournament that just happened. It's like, oh, okay, cool. So I
Yeah,
made
have
a
you
lot of
seen
those.
water before? Good, swim and just
Uh-huh.
like throw it in the deep end of the pool.
I mean, it was a little like more conversation than that, but that was kind of the gist. It was like I've never edited anything before, but they had me do highlights videos, and I did their highlights videos for about a year or two, and
Yeah,
that's really where I got my practice editing, and I picked things up and I learned new things through that. And I think that's, I mean, it's just like fighting games. You have to practice and you have to improve your craft, and over time you kind of see, okay, I can improve this, or I messed up this, so next time you need to focus on having better lighting or better framing, or
right.
make sure the cut has some extra time in so it's not straight into whatever audio.
Yeah. Or,
So
when you do interviews, like maybe don't start talking immediately after the person answers their question, so it doesn't sound like you're chopping them off at the end. It's like things like that. You can't block a mix up you've never seen before. It's very hard to block a mix up you've never seen before. So sometimes you got to get hit with stuff that you don't expect to be like, okay, next time I block high, or next time I leave a little bit more tail room on a question, or next time, like maybe I don't do an interview in front of a giant speaker blaring Marvel 3 music. That's probably not a good idea. So you have to have you have to experience, and you have to be okay with failure to get better.
right. And I think that I really like what you just said about being okay with failure. I think there's a really heavy focus in our group, right? Or not our group, just like society, that everything has to be good first try. Everything has to be right. No, there's room for mistakes and there's for improvement. Just make sure that you take advantage of it. Don't keep
Yep.
making the same mistakes. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again if it's wrong.
And sometimes those quote unquote mistakes, or those quote unquote accidents, lead into like new opportunities. Like my entire interview style, in terms of like my older videos when I got started, was by an accident. Like usually at the time, you have a lot of people who would like kind of record themselves doing interviews, like with stick mics and stuff like that. And I was gonna do that with a friend of mine, but he like got cold feet and literally ran away
Oh
like
man.
5 minutes before I was supposed to interview Mike Ross. So the notion of like doing a head on interview where like I don't speak, it's just the player speaking to the camera, was by an accident. And then I liked that style because it was more of the player talking to the audience. So I was like, cool, let this rock uh, for as long as I can. And that was how I did interviews for multiple years. To the fact that it confused some people, they're like, "Wait, what do you mean you don't want to be in the frame with me?" I'm like, "No, you're just gonna talk to me through the camera. That's all we're gonna do." Uh, and I think that, yeah, like it was like just an accident, and it really set that style separated me from the pack essentially. So you, even when things don't go according to plan, you have to be able to pivot and be light on your feet and just kind of go with the flow. I think that's super important.
Right. So when you're going with the flow, can you talk some about the transition of hold back to block to maybe those longer form videos, adding in the documentaries, and kind of what I saw was a lot of old like short interviews,
Mhm.
event clips, moments, some gameplay. So can you talk a little bit about that transition?
Yeah. So when I started Hold Back the Blog, first, it wasn't even a fun thing. It was literally a gaming review blog I had in college with a friend, because I wanted to review Alan Wake and like Gears 3, I think, or whatever I was playing at the time, and like Snatcher, just like random games I was playing. And then my friend just kind of gave me the web domain, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. You can take it." I'm like, "Sweet." And it's like, "Well, what do I like? I like fighting games." So, like I mentioned before, I was using it for practice and all that. Like, and then it kind of started building up speed, like, or picking up steam. Like, people were kind of digging the content I was putting out, and I was liking what I was putting out, and I was kind of getting used to like becoming a content creator is what we call it now. But like, I was just getting used to telling stories and having other people tell the stories to camera. So what happened is like I built up enough of a rep where I was able to crowdfund a documentary called FGC Rise of the Fighting Game Community. We crowdfunded that. I put that out, and that started to get the attention of certain companies, particularly Bandai Namco. They reached out. They're like, "Hey, we're doing this thing in 2016. It's called the Tekken Tour. We are trying to keep momentum in the States because Tekken 7 was out in Asia for a very long time. It was out in arcades before we ever got it."
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to keep momentum going for the game because it was going to be like another year or two before it came out here. So they decided to actually ship a whole bunch of like Tekken 7 arcade like kits, cabinet kits around the country and do like a US only tournament circuit so that people can qualify for the nationals. And if they win the nationals, they'd be sent to Japan to play in the globals. So we're doing it a couple of times. And in 2016, they decided to do like a documentary on it, or like a documentary kind of like every stop would have like a short, or every stop would have a feature. And because they saw my work with my documentary, they saw that they could hire me instead of like hiring an entire like film crew or whatever and like losing a lot of money. Whereas like I can keep the budget low because I'm a one-man team. Like that's something I don't think a lot of people know, is that like I do everything myself. I'm the videographer, I'm the editor, I'm the producer. I come up with all the stories, all that stuff. So I kind of moved away from the channel at that point because now it was starting to get more and more client work, and the Tekken stuff was pretty intensive. It was like go to an event, shoot for 3 days, find the story of the event, and then edit a short documentary like 10 to like 15 minutes in like 4 days to put up on Friday, the following Friday. It's like super, super time consuming, super intense. So I kind of moved away from doing channel stuff, and the channel just kind of sat there. And then I started working with a group called NoClip. NoClip does a lot of gaming documentaries on like mainstream games, things on like Fallout. They just put out something on Outer Wilds. A lot of big games. It's run by a cool dude called Danny O'Dwyer. He used to work for Games. And through them, I kind of got the idea of like, well, this would be cool. I would really like to do something like this for fighting game. And they even gave me a chance to do something for them. I did a whole documentary on Team Spooky or Spooky about his life story and how he got involved with Evo. And I saw that did pretty well. And I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something here. And I still have this channel that's sitting there. So what if I go ahead and sort of incorporate the things I've learned from this Tekken project, as well as working with NoClip, and kind of, because I didn't want to do like interviews again, because times have changed. Everyone was doing interviews, and they're great. I think interviews are needed, but I just didn't want to be kind of like another like interview channel. I wanted to start to apply the things I'd learned with the Tekken project and with NoClip, and start to really kind of take a different spin on fighting games. And so Danny actually helped me put the Patreon together. And so we sort of whole Back to Block channel with the Patreon start to focus on more in-depth stories, not necessarily just short interviews, more like in-depth features, like things like looking behind the making of Them's Fighting Herds, or telling the story of Uni's story from, being not put in Evo to getting into Evo 7 years after its arcade release and stuff like that. So it was really through a combination of like getting more rep in like freelancing scenes and kind of getting more experience with telling long form stories through my work or my freelance work that allowed me to develop my point to kind of come back to this channel, like where I originally started, and really start to do different kinds of projects, more in-depth, longer form types of project, and not worry about an algorithm or YouTube algorithm, because I'm being supported through my patrons. I don't even run ads on my videos at this point.
Right. And I've watched the whole Tekken documentary that covers that year of the Tekken tour, where you put together all of the events, and it's such a great story with everything that happened, like all of the US players trying to grab spots, and Anakin just relinquishing his spot every time.
Anakin is a monster. Like that was like that. I could not believe that year of him. Like if you just didn't know, in the 2018 tour, there was a rule where if you won a spot, like if you won a tournament, you were into the final, but you couldn't play again, right? So like you couldn't just enter the next event and keep winning. The only way you could enter was if you relinquished that spot, basically put it up for a last chance qualifier, and then win again. So Anakin did that like 5-ish times, and not only was like it impressive that he won so much, but it built like this last chance qualifier where there was like 8 spots up for grab or whatever, and like it was a 1 day tournament. And I think we played that tournament. We started like 10 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning. We didn't end till 3 a.m. the next.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just this grueling for everybody involved, for the streamers, for me doing video. I think we do Spirigen's interview at like 3:30 a.m. like after he wins like his match, and it's like it was like a grueling experience, but it's one of the best experiences ever, and that's the highlight in that documentary.
Right. So you kind of talked about it. So I was curious, how has your work changed compared to when you started to now about just like making connections with either game companies or players, setting up interviews, like getting into tournaments? How has that changed from kind of before the Tekken doc to after?
So it's interesting. Like a lot of the stuff I did before, like even even for like the FGC Rise doc, like that one was still very grassroots in terms of how I built the connections to make that. So like I had become friends with like Joe and John, who were subjects in the doc, and they would help me connect people with like Big E. So like Big E in Philly, he's a big name. He basically runs all the tournaments out here. And like through those guys, they would be like they would vouch for me essentially. Like same thing with like I'm forgetting his name, but like they would vouch for me, and they would kind of be like, hey, do you know this Esteban guy? He's pretty good with the camera. You should like let him like go behind the scenes a little bit and like do some film work. Like don't worry about it too much. He knows what he's doing. And slowly I built like this rep in between, like at least on the East Coast and then eventually on the West Coast, where like getting access to an event or getting like a media pass was like, oh yeah, we've seen you at events before and you do pretty good work, and we also see that you put your work out, because a lot of people go to events and like they'll film and you'll never see anything. So I was building because I would show up at events, and because I put things out, people were like, oh, he's reliable, he's trustworthy, whatever he's trying to put together.
Mm-hmm.
And then when, you know, I started working with Bandai, and I did a couple of things for Bandai. I did not only the 2016 tour, I did some stuff in 2017 for them for Tekken, as well as I did a whole documentary on Soul Calibur for them, for like right before Soul Calibur 6 came out. I was talking about like the roots of the community and like what people were looking forward to. Like I sort of built a rep in the industry. I'd be like, oh, this is Esteban. He does really good video work. And so I did more and more event work, and sort of like it kind of just came with like, it was a little bit more official, but it was similar in a way where like it was still people kind of, it was like it's not just what you know, it's who you know, like able to get you what you needed essentially. And now things have changed where it's not necessarily through a company or anything like that that's giving me access. It's me, like it's me as a person. It's like it's Esteban, it's the fighting game guy. It's you know, here's his work, here's his channel, and because the stuff I've been putting out has been, I would like to think, of really good quality, and it tells a really good. It allows people like Microsoft. Like I actually went to Microsoft to talk to them about Killer Instinct for this project I'm doing, and you know I was able to show them what I was doing, and like I put out a video earlier on like netcode, like the netcode and KI talking to Keats, Adam Hart, and like Microsoft saw that, was like, okay, like he's not just here for an expose or anything like that. He's not here to cause drama. He's here to tell the story of this game. So let's help him out. And they got me to sit with like Ken Lobb, who's like the creator of like Killer Instinct, and James Goddard and Adam Isgray and Ernest Young, and like all these people that worked on this game at Microsoft. I literally went to Seattle, went to the Microsoft campus, and sat down with people in their house essentially,
Wow.
which does not happen if no one trusts you. So it's changed really from like the scale of like the people I'm talking to. Like I'm no longer just talking to people in the community. I'm talking to people in companies like Microsoft or companies like, you know, Iron Galaxy. But it's still very much rooted in that, like, it's really people trusting you because they see you doing good work, and they see you being responsible for the stories you're getting, and not trying to like stir up drama in the edit or anything like that. They just believe in your skills and they trust you, and then it's mostly word of mouth.
Right. And I think that, I mean, for any job, that, especially in esports, where there's so much new stuff happening constantly, that trust of people being able to say, I know this guy, he does good work,
Yep.
he'll get it out, it'll be good. is very important, especially to anyone looking to get into the scene. If you can get that trust out there, then you'll be able to find work.
Yeah, I think a lot of people ask me like, well, how do I you get started by doing. Like, yeah, it sounds daunting, and it sounds daunting and it's easy at the same time. But you get started by going out there and putting yourself out there. But you also get started by being responsible. And if you're going to make something, holding yourself accountable to a deadline and holding yourself accountable to like, I'm going to see this from start to finish. I think a lot of people start, but they never finish because they're worried about quality or they're worried about what other people will think about it or any kind of stuff. And I tell a lot of people who get started, just like, hey, just come up with an idea, whatever idea you have, even if it's not good, even if it's not original, keep it maintainable because you don't want to do like a whole documentary getting started in video because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And see it through to the end. Be like, I want this out in 2 weeks. No matter like as best as I can make it. But on Friday it's coming out. We're going to just push it out and then we'll move on to the next one and we'll practice and we'll iterate and we'll get better. I think a lot of people just kind of start and be like, well, I need to make this perfect. And then they never put anything out and then they never start the momentum because you have to start the momentum because it takes a while to kind of build it up to where you would do something like a Patreon where you focus on.
Right. So when it comes to kind of that consistency, how do you go about maintaining that content output and then after that coming up with new ideas?
So it's changed. When I first started the channel, I was very much on that. I was doing interviews. I was very much like, I got 7 interviews at an event, and I got to put them out like every day or put them out like every week, and like try to build like this weird consistency that was like forming this treadmill that I could never keep up on. Like I would get burned out, I would get tired because like I was trying to make things for an algorithm that's like really doesn't support like the average content creator.
Right.
Like you need a team to really output that much content daily or stuff like that. So I eventually like stopped caring about it. Now I don't even care about it when I put out videos for Hold Back to Block Now in the current iteration. Like I was saying yesterday, it was that I'm like the antithesis of the YouTube algorithm. I put out big videos occasionally, which is like, Google hates me. But and I don't run ads on them, so like they definitely don't like me. But I do it at a rate that one, I can maintain the quality of the content and allows me to tell the story I want to tell. Like if I was trying to put out a documentary every month, like especially a big one, like the KI thing I'm working on, or even like the Them's Fighting Herds. Them Fighting Herds like 45 minutes long. It's 5 different interviews. It's a lot to juggle.
Right.
I would not be able to maintain the consistency and quality in storytelling. So I have set up a thing where it's like, with Patreon, I'm very open to my patrons. Like, hey, this is when this is coming out. This is when that's coming out. It's like open communication. So like they see the schedule, they hold me accountable. And like if something's going to be delayed, I go, hey, this is going to be delayed for this reason and for that. But here's a little something to tide you over, stuff like that. So I don't worry too much about like when I put something out. I put something out when it's ready and when I feel it's ready. In terms of coming up with projects afterwards, I have, God, when everything kind of broke out with this COVID stuff, I actually sat down. It was at Final Combat. That was a funny story. Took off on an airplane to go to a job, and by the time I landed, my job did not exist. So I was just in Chicago, and it's like, cool, this is dope. So I sat down there, like, I had some extra time and I was like in the crowd, so to speak. And I actually just wrote out the next 2 years worth of content for Holdback, or at least 2 years worth of content for Holdback. Just not fully fleshed out, just thoughts like, what can I do this? How can I do this? How can I do this? How can I do this? And I just kind of, I'm a very big supporter of just kind of spitballing, right? So like, what about this idea? And I write that down. What about this idea? And then I'll go back and be like, okay, so what's involved in an idea like this? So like, let's say I want to do something on Marvel 2 because Marvel 2 is going to be at Evo this year.
Yep.
It's like, well, what would I tackle? Well, I would talk to maybe these 3 people or these 4 people, and like I'll write down like Yipes, Justin, and like Sanford, or like Ducto or something like that. And I write those people. So okay, what do I want to talk about? And I want to talk about like the game, and like that's how it starts to happen. Where it's like the idea starts to flesh out in a way where it's not so structured. It's kind of like freestyle, kind of like jazz, where like I'm just kind of in the moment and I'm just going down. And then maybe I don't even do that idea until years down time, but I'm fleshing out like ideas as they come to me. Like I get all my best documentary ideas in the shower, just straight up. Just all my best ideas come in the shower, and I'm like, oh yeah, we should try. And then like, be great. Or like when I'm about to take off, or I'm on a plane, like I just open up my phone, have like a little note file type of, and I'll just flesh it out, and I'll flesh it out until I feel like the idea is ready to go into production. So you get that when you're immersed. For me, I'm immersed in the scene, and that I live it. Like in terms of like it's my job. It's what I do when I want to relax. Like I play a lot of fighting games to hang out. It's my community. So you just happen to be immersed, and you hear these kind of things that are happening, or you pay attention to things that are happening, and you go, I think that'd be a good story. Let me go hunt it down and talk to the people that may know, may have some leads on where I can better tell the story. And that's how it happens, at least for me. I know a lot more people are a lot more structured. They kind of like, they have like the Charlie Day like wireframe on the walls and stuff like that. But I'm very much like, I think this is a cool idea. Let's start to put it together on paper, and then
Got it. That I just think of the like Pepe La Sylvia all over the wall.
Like, oh god, he's got the red lines. Like, what's going on here?
Oh man. So to you, kind of going with that, coming up with ideas, I want to kind of look at the why. So what part of telling FGC stories is what makes it so important for you?
For me, especially at the beginning, I thought it was, fighting games are something I love. Like in terms of like some of my favorite games are fighting games. Like Vampire Savior is my favorite fighting game. I love Tekken 7. Like that, literally, that's a game that allowed me to leave my job and become full time free. And then on top of that, the game's great.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always a genre, especially at the time that I started the channel. Like it was always, I always felt like was not getting the respect it deserved in mainstream media or in media in general. Like it was very much like people only talked about fighting games when they had like a story of somebody like stealing money or a story of harassment or something like that. And they're kind of pointing a finger at fighting games like these people are terrible. And I was like, well, that sucks. Let me make something where we kind of tell it how it is from the community level, and we go talk to players and the like, and kind of figure out, get the vibe of the community from the community, like for us by us essentially. And it was kind of at a necessity, like outside of practicing what I wanted to practice, I just wanted to celebrate a genre I loved. And thankfully that's changed, like as more and more people from the community have taken positions in places like Kotaku and stuff like that. Like Ian Max is great. Like we get a better representation now, especially because more and more people are watching. Like more and more people are celebrating fighting games outside of things like Evo. Because fighting games only existed in the mainstream consciousness when Evo was around. But now we have all these tours, or we have all these events like Combo Breaker that have reached the level of notability where fighting games are way more respected. It's same esports in general, actually, like way more respected now. So I'd like to think I have a little bit of a hand in that. Who knows? But yeah, it was really kind of this thing. I just wanted to showcase this scene that I loved and this genre that I love. And the only way I really knew how to do that was through the people on the games that I played or played with.
Right. And I think that passion is important because, to me at least, it comes through in your videos that your passion is there, and also the people that are in it, that they're passionate about whatever they're talking about.
Yeah, and like I had a knowledge, right? So like for the spooky video I did for spooky video I did, we talked to Vic and we talked to Seth Killian, and if you're somebody that's not in the scene, that might be the only two people you talk to. But then because of me and because I have a history in like the East Coast, I talked to my friend Alan, who's better known as Stickbug. He's like the godfather of East Coast anime. No one, if you're not in the scene, you probably don't know to talk to them because you probably don't know who he is. He's somebody who keeps in the background, but he was one of the first like East Coast streamers, especially for anime. He was the one that kind of, alongside Vic, started to kind of put what the modern stream kit looks together, along with people like Seb and stuff from FADC. But like, I think that's where the advantages for being immersed in is that you know who these people are when maybe like bigger corporations or like bigger outlets who are just kind of doing the surface story or not getting as deep as they should, is by being immersed and being able to kind of like, that's where that love and that's where that representation really just showcasing the lifestyle because you're living it.
Right. Yeah, and just I think that kind of insider knowledge is important, and it kind of leads into my next question. When it comes to the interviews and the people that you talk to, I think there was a tweet I saw maybe last week that you put out about not leading people to certain answers. So, to like kind of avoid that and just in general kind of get the story told, how do you go about preparing for interviews?
So it's a lot different now in terms of like it's not as structured as like I used to like do like little notes or like actually for the FGC doc, I actually wrote out full questions, which was a bad idea because when I'm in the middle of an interview, I'm then like looking at my questions. I was like, this is not good. And it changed when I worked with Danny, where Danny would have like a bullet point list, but he had most of it in his head, so that he was always fully engaged with the subject. So for me, like how I do interviews now, it's very much like wrestlers backstage figuring out the run of show in their match, where I have a general theme I want to hit. So like when I'm talking to Keats or like Adam Hart, I know that I want to touch on, because he's like a battle designer, right? So I want to touch on balance and battle design and how you balance that in a game, as long with the characters you have, and then we want to talk about netcode as well. So like I'll go in with like some general questions, like warm up questions in my head, like how did you get into gaming? Who did you play, or what did you play? How did you get into fighting games? And that gets people accustomed to talking to me on camera and used to the workflow, because I am a one-man team, so I'm also monitoring my camera and my audio and everything by myself. So like that gets them used to the fact that like I may occasionally look at the camera to make sure that it's in focus and all that kind of stuff. It might fiddle with stuff, but they should just keep talking, and we're just having a conversation. And then slowly kind of find not just the story that I'm looking for in terms of like, okay, if I'm talking to a battle director or a battle designer, we should probably talk combat, kind of get them to talk combat, but also but also paying attention to what they're interested in talking about. So people light up when they're interested about talking, and you have to kind of be aware of that, be looking. And so if somebody says, like I really liked such and such because of this and X, Y, sometimes they won't say anything unless they're prodded to. So sometimes you have to dive deeper, which is where a full list of questions will limit you because you're so set on like this certain story. Whereas people want to talk about what they want to talk about, so you should just let them go. So in terms of like the netcode stuff with Adam, like I only had like 2 questions really, like how does it work and why is it important? And then from those 2 questions, we just had a conversation about it, and that's how you got that whole video. And we, there were things I didn't know where I'd be like, well, how does that work? Like I was wrong about it, he would correct me, and then that leads to more content. So it's less of a structured thing and more of a free form, like just like how I put my project together, is more of a free form conversation. And I try to not have as much as possible outside of the camera and outside my audio stuff obstructing my view or being distractions or anything in the interview, so that we can really just have a conversation and talk 1-to-1 or 2-on-1, depending on like what's the nature of the interview, because I feel like it gets the subject a lot more comfortable quicker, and you get a lot better dialogue, a lot better narrative out of that if you're just talking.
Right. And you kind of talked about how you had set questions when you did the FGC doc, and that's something they really focused on because I'm studying journalism right now.
Mm.
When they talk about interviews, they're like, don't write down questions because you lock yourself into a pattern or certain things. You don't allow that fluidity to go off on something that someone mentioned that could be an interesting part of the story, and you're
Yep.
not like allowing yourself that room to move around.
Yep.
So once you do have the interviews and you have all your shots, how do you, and I think you kind of talked about this yesterday a little bit, putting the story together so it makes sense using what you have and not kind of what you wish you had?
So this happens a lot because you can only go in knowing so much about a story before you start putting it together. So like I'll go into an interview expecting somewhat of a story. Like for instance, in the terms of Killer Instinct, like that's a game that switched hands and developers between seasons, right? So like I will know that that will come up at some point, but I might not necessarily know about how it all came about or what it was like when they got the news and stuff like that. I can only structure my story into before doing all the video. I can only structure my story on paper to a certain amount. So once I hear all the stories and once I start to kind of get all the interviews down, at least when I edit, I break everything down into like narrative segments. So I have like, the first KI, or, making the KI 2013, or in the case of like the UD doc, like, what is Under Night? How does it play? How did the community start to develop, and what was it like to go into Evo? And then from there, like you try not to be too set. Like the story will present itself. You do not make the story. The beats, like the beats you want to hit. But after that, like when you start doing the interviews and we start talking to people, and you start they starts telling you what's really going on and what's happening, then the story starts to present itself, and then you have to be like, okay, so now in the edit, I have to structure this out so I can best represent the story that has emerged, not just the story I want to tell, because there might just be, you just don't know the full story until you get it done. So I'll do all my interviews. I watch every single interview in the edit. That's why it takes me a little bit long to make things, because like I'll sit down, I'll watch like an hour and a half interview. I'll be like, okay, well this goes here, maybe this will line up over here. And then when we do that 5 times or 6 times, or in the case of Killer Instinct, 17 times, uh, we'll start to better understand where all the Lego fit. And then from there, start to smooth things out. So like Ken Lon said something about this over here that James said, so I'll move this over here. But then like Nikki said something that lines up to that. And then we go there. And then like, usually you come out of that with like a blob of content. And that's where you start to edit and start to laser focus what you want to say, what you want to represent. Because a lot of people will say a lot of things, but you want to find the heart of the story and start to kind of cut the extra for other things down the line.
Right. So when you do kind of start focusing that story and really try to give it that focus, how do you personally try to use like either B-roll footage of events or locations and then game footage to kind of accompany what people are talking
I try to. Like in the case of a really good example of this is in the case of I did a feature called Inside Combo Breaker. I got to sit down and talk to Rick, the Hado,
about?
about Combo Breaker, and about a lot of that was talking about the venue. Now we did that interview. I got to Combo Breaker on like a Wednesday or Tuesday. We did that interview because I also helped them with all their media stuff in terms of like all the intro videos and putting together all the commercials, or sending a videographer to film Sage I'm eating a hot dog 5 times in a row. Like I handle all that stuff, so I manage all that stuff, and I get it. So we had some time where I was like, "Hey, Rick, let's sit down for an hour. Let's just talk about Combo Breaker." So we did that interview way before the event, and then on Sunday, client, we just have to worry about time. Okay, he said something about like how this building is. Oh, there's a line. There's like the weird sign over here where it's like a fan like blowing on. Like that kind of showcases the rinky-dink nature of like the place, right? So I kind of keep in mind. I like to do my interviews first. That changes when you're doing the story development of a fighting game. Like Them's Fighting Herds, a lot of that stuff might no longer exist. Them's Fighting Herds was a big challenge, because if you've seen the story, the team was hit with a cease from their original game, which was like a fighting game based on My Little Pony. And builds of that game don't exist. Like they just don't exist anymore. They're legally not allowed to exist. And there are versions of the game that are out there, but the team was terrified about incorporating any of that stuff into. And like usually, like I have like creative freedom when I made it, but I try to be as cautious and try not to put my subjects in any like legal danger or anything like that, because that's just responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a challenge in that, okay, I might not have any B-roll, or I might only have like 5 screenshots. How do I get creative with it? And that led me to the point, if you've never seen the documentary, that led me to the point to actually buying a bunch of My Little Pony toys and recreating like what some of the characters did, or like having fun with it and stuff like that. And like the team loved it, and they were like, "This is great. Just do this." So like sometimes you just have to get creative and make the B-roll with images, or a little bit of motion graphics, or like props and stuff like that. Like when I bought a baguette for the uni doc, one, because I was hungry.
Okay.
Like that was my lunch. Like part of my lunch was like, I'm gonna grab some bread. Oh yeah, let's just have some fun with this and shoot the intro like this. So you have to, and you have to like not just be handcuffed to like, I have to shoot 70 shots at the event, because if I don't get them, then I don't have anything to cover. Like, no, you might be able to get like an image, or you might be able to recreate it with toys, or you may be able to kind of like have fun with it. And that's like, especially now, like I did a whole thing with Sage. I'm talking about the combo system in KI, and he has like this famous analogy where like the combos in KI are like a sandwich. So like I was cutting that up, and I was like, oh man, like I was like dropping ideas in the edit, like, oh, we can go get a sandwich here, we can go shopping here, we can go do this here. And I was like, okay, we can have fun with this, where we just don't have to show just the game, but we can
Right.
kind of just take what this person's saying and like represent this weird meta level and just be cool. So I would not, for those, because like everyone starts the B-roll phase. Like everyone's like, I got to have all these shots to line up what they're saying, but don't feel like you need to be handcuffed to it. Like sometimes you just have to go out there and go fake it or make it and see what happens and just have fun with it. That's where I have a lot of fun with it.
Right. So when it comes to um, kind of having videos that are focused on different things, because there's like some of the videos seem to be kind of focused on certain people, some of
Mhm.
the videos are focused on a game, and some are focused on just like a tournament. How do you kind of change the storytelling approach for each of those focuses?
Each of those focuses are they're what's the best way to say it? It's not just because I want to do something on, let's say, Core Gaming. Like, it's not just because I want to do something on Gerald. It'll be like I want to do something on making like a theme, like so making good content, making good quality videos.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll incorporate a bit of that person's personality. Like I want to do on Gerald. It doesn't have to just be something on Jared. It can be something on this channel. And then I also happened to be there at the time where they were opening the studio for like tournaments and stuff like that. So like we can talk into like how that transitions to becoming like a manager for like this building and stuff like that. So it's less on like I want to do a profile and I want to do a documentary on the history of the game, and I want to do like an interview, or I want to do like a thing on a tournament. And it's more of, well, what themes do I want to hit? So what is it like running a tournament? What is it running a YouTube channel? What is it like? What was the story behind the making of this fighting game all about fighting ungulates? So like sometimes the stories approach me. So like the them's fighting hurts thing was supposed to be a no clip thing that became a hold back to block thing. And then sometimes it's just like I'm just curious. Like I don't know what it's like to run a tournament. So let's talk to Rick, who not only runs his own tournament, but runs like helped run the Tekken World Tour for many years, or helped with like Capcom Pro Tour and stuff like that. So it'll be a little bit of a mixture of like a theme that I have in my head and just my own natural curiosity of like, I'm curious about how this all came together. Let's go learn about it. And while I'm also making this project at the same time to teach other people.
Got it. So I think I've kind of asked a lot of questions about storytelling and some of the benefits and what's great about the fighting games community. So I kind of want to look at the other side and what are some of the struggles that you have as a
Oh
videographer
boy.
working at FGC events?
Oh boy. Lighting is definitely on. Lighting goddamn nightmare. There are times like Tekken World Tour this year. Like I was just an event thing. It wasn't. I was doing any kind of like doc stuff. But in Thailand, I think everybody was like bathed in red, which is like why. I get it. I get why. But it's just like man, it's a nightmare. Uh, like lighting is always tough. Like in fact, a lot of it's like weird. Like so, like I kickstarted the FGC Rise of the Fighting Game Community doc, and in it I bought lights. I bought like the most unwieldy lights ever. It was like an octo kind of gate setup where 12 bulb lights I had to screw in all the
Oh
time and
man.
stuff. It was a nightmare and they cost so much. Like, so I was like, I've got to use them. I used it once. I used them like once or twice. I used them for shooting Joe and John's interviews in Long Island and shooting the first LK interview in his room. And then I was like, this is too much. Like, it's too much so the rest of that documentary is actually shot with like all natural lighting. There's like no other lighting outside of that. So it's like, sometimes you just have to be aware of like, okay, where are there windows that it's not too noisy, and I'll just sit you right there, and then we'll just talk because I can't set these lights up. Now I have like smaller like LED panels that are a lot easier to travel with, just in case. But even then, sometimes if there's good lighting, natural lighting somewhere, I'll do that. Sound is another issue because we are in giant convention spaces, or not just like smaller hotel ballrooms, or like smaller just like kind of game spaces. So there's a lot of, but in a way where like I like the crowd noise in the background. So if you like look at a lot of my earlier stuff, or even look at a lot of my stuff now, I try to film most interviews with like a decent crowd or like a small crowd, because I think it goes a long way to making people feel immersed in the scene and like feels like they're there. And I think that helps builds a little bit of like an attachment when you're watching. But it is a lot to manage because and it's definitely when I did the interview with Helst, there was this one dude, I don't know who he was, but I was doing the interview with Helst about the locals at Tekken. And like you see me interviewing the TO like right here, and like I got my, that's not the time to pop off for what felt like an hour straight. Come on, like help me out here. Help me help you. There's some players that just don't realize what's going on and like will just like yell and stuff like that. And that's cool, like you want that stuff. But like sometimes you have to like, repeat questions or like ask somebody to start again, because like it was funny because Health actually turned around, like yelled at the guy, was like, "Can you shut up? I'm trying to do an interview. Like you're killing me." It was great.
Oh man.
Yeah, so like lighting and sound are like the two big things. I think the amount of equipment you take with you is actually you don't want to burden yourself too much. Like I carry a lot of stuff with me. That's slowly changing as I build a kit for more like travel like safety, or like more prone for travel, I should say. But yeah, I think lighting and sound are like the biggest ones, and then just kind of being aware of uh, where you are and like where you can leave your stuff. So like one of the biggest benefits of not just knowing people on the scene and kind of getting my name out was that like I could leave my stuff behind the stream table.
Hmm.
So like knowing Spooky early on, and knowing people like Bufuteki, and knowing people like Chris Sag and stuff like even when I wasn't working with them, I'd be like, "Hey, can I just like leave like some of my stuff back here, like in the corner?" They'd be like, "Yeah, great," because they trust me not to steal any of their stuff, or also trust me not to touch any of their stuff or mess up the broadcast. And that was like that gave me like free, safe space to hold my stuff. So like if something did start to pop off, like in that one, that I could drop my stuff and like not have to hold of it, and if things started to pop off in the event, I can go run, grab it, record it, get what I needed without having to like run up to my room or hold everything on for. So I would say lighting, space, and sound are like the three things, especially with fighting, that you really have to kind of consider, really kind of have to like figure out before or when you're at an event.
Right. So could you talk kind of a little bit about the gear you do bring to tournaments?
Sure. So it's changed over the years. The first camera I ever had, T2i, Canon T2i, which was a really good camera if you had light. It worked as well as like a 5D Mark II, which was like the same cameras they used to film a bunch of the shots in Mad Max, like a bunch of the like racing shows on DSLRs.
Hmm.
The problem is none of the fighting game community. So a lot of my earlier footage is like this dark grainy stuff because that's what I had to work with. But it was also like $700 camera I got. It had interchangeable lenses and allowed me to get my stories and allowed me to start to practice. Then it became a 5D Mark II, and then after the Tekken stuff in 2016, that's when I decided to kind of go like take the leap, and I bought my main documentary camera as a 5, which is a very expensive camera, but also a very good camera. And then my secondary camera now is a A7 III, which is for like the documentary stuff is all done in FS5 for the most part. Then when I have to go into like low light situations, or like I don't have as much control of the light as possible, we use the A7 III to shoot like 4 images in good like quality and stuff like that. And that's what I've been experimenting with, like using that as a way. And then like there's a bunch of stuff on top of that. So like instead of wireless mics for audio, if I were to give advice to anybody starting, and some money on cameras, but the thing that people are going to notice all the time is your audio. So that's the thing you want to prioritize. Like you can have the worst
All right. My Discord just crashed, so I'm gonna try to get that back up quick, and then we will resume. Sorry about this, everyone. Be 1 second.
And just go for it again.
Yep. All right. We are back. Let me fix the display quick. All right. You are good to go. We were talking a little bit about kind of gear at events.
Yeah, so I got a couple of good cameras, but the thing that like you mostly want to focus on is audio because you could have the best image in the world, and then everyone will notice. Like if everyone saw, no one's gonna watch your video. Just no one. Like audio is the thing I would spend the most premium on that you can afford. Obviously, don't go broke because you can't run a business broke. But yeah, just a couple of good cameras, good audio, lights if you can afford it. It's not necessary. Depending on what cameras you have, you kind of help you out in like low light areas and stuff like that. But it's important to kind of keep the kit to what you need and don't overspend because you think you need this or you think you need that or you need to be shooting in 4K when really not many people can stream 4K content. They're just starting to get to that point and the like. And then like there are a couple of editors out there that are for free and stuff like that. But like when I do events, sometimes I'm carrying up to 45 pounds of extra equipment. That's not counting like my own clothes and like my laptop and all that kind of stuff. So like I'm pudgy, but like I got a little bit of punch to me. Like I can move some stuff. I can move some weight because I live on the third floor as well of my apartment. So like carrying all that stuff down is like, oh yeah, this is great. And then carrying it to the airport and then carrying it to so you get a bit of a workout, but you don't. That's not a requirement. You want to get the equipment for what you need, not for what you need and what you expect, not because some list on the internet tells you need 5 lights and like a 8K recorder and all that stuff.
Right. And I did see that if people are interested in learning more about how to create like a setup for shooting videos and stuff, you do have a Patreon goal on the Fold
Yes.
Back to Block Patreon about that, which
Yes.
is kind of part of our next topic as well, which I was curious about how you went about the decision to add Patreon and kind of have that as the main source of income for Fold Back to Block videos.
So it was sort of a necessity in a way where like uh I had been working with NoClip and I had seen what they had done with their stuff, and I was very curious if it could be replicated in a much smaller space, like still in game but in fighting games, and with a much smaller personality. Like Danny Dwyer is somebody who has like 50,000 followers on Twitter, and like, but I don't at the time didn't really have that much of an audience for me anyway. Like my content had an audience, but not necessarily me, the person, had an audience. But I had done things like raise $10,000 for a documentary without many people knowing who I was. So I was pretty smart with it. It says I was curious if the no clip format could be replicated in fighting games, and if so, like what kind of adjustments would be needed. And with the nature of the stories I wanted to tell, there was no way I could like keep up daily videos or anything like that. So I was like, I want to build a platform like NoClip is, like an ad agnostic, view agnostic content platform where we only care about not that we don't care about the many viewers that we have or the comments and like that, but like our main focus is the patrons. If patrons are happy, we're happy because they're the ones keeping our lights on. So I kind of took the no clip formula, and Danny actually helped me build my Patreon actually. So like we kind of applied the no clip formula, and we at the beginning applied it directly to, and then now that I am the only person running it, I've started to adjust it in a way that suits more fighting games and suits more my workflow, how I edit things. And we're finding pretty good success. Like considering like there are only a couple of Patreons actually in fighting games. Like I think Corey Gaming has one, Born Free has one, Pat the Flip has one, and all three of those people have much bigger audiences than I do. But with what I've been doing with Hold Back to Block and how I've been marketed and how I've been kind of patron centric, we have a healthy amount of patrons. I think we have like 86 last time I checked this morning, which is pretty good in the fighting game space. And they're actively involve them in decisions we make with the channel as well. Like for instance, we worked with Radiance to put together, because I had a bunch of teams reaching out wanting to help, but we couldn't figure out, like they were like, some of them were offering like obscene money, and I was like, this is not sustainable. You cannot give me this much amount of money because I'm not going to do 17 features on you, because then this just channel becomes like insert teams in a channel. So like we worked with Radiance on a way to kind of build like a special contributors tier. So like Equinox is a part of it as well. And like, how can they support my content at a higher level without like feeling like they have to be responsible for like editorial stuff or any kind of thing like that. But that did not go through until I talked to my patrons. I was specifically the $20 patrons, because like it affects how long their names are on the screen. Like that's the producer tier, right? That's how you get your name on the screen. And if they did not okay that, it was not going to happen. Like I will refuse money if it doesn't if my patrons don't like it, it doesn't fit the spirit of what we're doing here. So I've sort of made Patreon the focus. Like it has become the center of my quote unquote business, the center of my channel. Like, and everything goes through Patreon. Everything goes through my patrons and stuff like that. And if they want to, most of them use it like as a tip jar, like they like my work, so they'll drop $3, $5 or whatnot. And then some of them are a little bit more involved. They comment on the posts that we have, or comment on the videos and stuff like that. Or they join the Discord. I have like 6 people in my Discord that nobody really talks to, but occasionally we do talk. And we talked about like things about like, narrative story flow and like why I choose certain subjects and why not. So people are engaged with it as much as they want to be, but I give them the option to be as involved as they want to be. And I think that's super important. I think that goes a long way to building like a community that wants to support your work, and not only wants to support it, but also kind of sees a bit of themselves in it, whether that's their name on the end credits, or they literally help keep my lights on, especially now. So it just made sense to just move everything to that, because I didn't know how Hold Back the Book was going to do with this new direction and whatnot, and I didn't want to be reliant on views and like, this thing we did with Gerald got like 30,000, but like this thing we did with Emily only got 3, so maybe we don't do any more stories on like that kind of stuff. Like, no, I want to tell the stories I want to tell. So it doesn't matter if a video gets like 1 view or 100 views or 1,000,000 views. It at the end of the day, if my patrons like it, we're going to do it, and if I like it, I'm more empowered by them to make it happen.
Right. So I think you kind of talked about it a little bit, but just if you want to go a little more into the value of crowdfunding and community support for you, and then just kind of the FGC content creation.
It's super important, especially because like unless you're like a big channel or anything like that, like it's hard to kind of build momentum. Stuff is expensive, right? Traveling to events is expensive. Buying the gear you need is expensive. The amount of time you put into a video is like, that's time you don't get back. And the entire principle of the FGC or or has been for a long time is like we're in this together in terms of like we're building this together. And yeah, we might have outside support, like events might get like outside sponsorships to help them keep the lights on, or like I may get something like a track thing with like Bandai Namco that helps keep the lights on. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to build this pillar, like this fighting game community together and keep it afloat through the good times and the bad times. So I think that if you put out good content and people want to support it, I think you should enable them and empower them. Let's just say empower them to allow you to support. I think a lot of people feel it used to be frowned upon back then. We're like running ads or like taking donations and stuff like that. But if people want to support you, they'll want to support you. People want to see good work, and if you let them do it, if you let them help you out, they'll help you out. And I think I'm not sure that it's necessarily going to be the primary way moving forward for a lot of people. I think it works for somebody like me who has like a small channel that can grow out to maybe be something bigger one day. But I think that it's hard out there, and like especially for content creators who are trying to start now, and they have to like especially right now and like these troubling times where like ad rates like fluctuate wildly and you don't know like how much a video is going to make over here or how much a video is going to make this month or like when like it kind of gets maddening. Whereas if you have a strong stable support from your community and start to build out your community, whether that's not just like video production or like streaming, like streamers nowadays are very important because like they build out like little communities and stuff like that, and like from there they get groundswell support. You can do the same thing with Patreon. You can do the same thing with like Kickstarter. So I think it's a good way going forward for people who want to start making content and start to build communities that way, or even like if they're pitching things to companies and nobody's biting, like nobody wants to do a documentary on fighting ungulates or like the story of KI. It's a good way to empower yourself. Like, well, we can do it now because we have like the support both from our audience and like financially now because they're pitching in. So it's like weird to say that like my entire business structure is on the goodwill of my patrons, but it's worked out for us so far. So I'm pretty cool. I'm pretty cool with it.
Yeah, as long as we get to keep getting cool stories from you, I'm all about it. So
Dope.
I think that is everything on the docket for today, and we're out of time anyways. So why don't
Perfect.
you tell everyone where they can find you and Hold Back to Block on the internet?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/Besteban. I'll be making Raving Final Fantasy VII Remake because it's awesome. I'll also occasionally be posting my content up there. You can watch all my videos at youtube.com/holdbacktoblock. And if you like what you see there and would like to, help me make more, put some of your hard-earned money to my work, you can become a patron over at patreon.com/holdbacktoblock. We got a wide assortment of tiers with a bunch of different options. You can get, you get $3 and you just see the updates, or you can get $5 for behind the scenes access or early access and stuff like that. So go ahead and take a look if you like my work and want to help, toss a few bucks my way. Every little bit helps. If not, you just want to share the videos, that helps too. Make the audience bigger, get my name out to more people. It definitely helps every little bit. So yeah, those are the places you can find me.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. That does it for episode 4 of the EQNX podcast, and I'll see everyone again in episode 5.
Bye.